anyone that would like, or type in the chat box if you'd like to comment on 5.
And so that would be a comment just on the minutes from last meeting.
Correct. Looks like everybody would like to speak so far. Everybody would like to speak to 8A, so we can proceed. There's no public comment on 5A.
Okay. So moving on to 6. No, we did 6.
No, now, yes, you do need to move on. This would be a non-agenda public comment. So if anyone in the attendees would like to comment on any non-agenda items, please say so in the chat box. Currently, again, I only have people that would like to comment on 8A.
Okay. So then we would just move forward to the staff report.
Sorry, real quick, I apologize. We went so fast over public comment, you forgot to approve the minutes on the actual consent item. Sorry.
Oh, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you, Meg. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mary seconds. Those in favor? Those oppose? Betsy opposed? Nope, she does not. Any abstains?
Perfect.
No.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so now on to agenda item number 7. Chris will start with the NUSD elementary to high school flow chart. Take it away,
Thank
Chris.
you. Jen's going to go ahead and share that flow chart here in a second. So one of the things that I want to share with the committee, with the community, is just sort of what the flow of students looks like as it goes across our district. This isn't something that I believe we need to spend a bunch of time on. It's something we may want to refer back to as we have these conversations, this meeting and in future meetings. Our school district is really set up so that it has the 8 elementary schools, including the K-8 school at Hamilton. It has 2 middle schools, 2 traditional middle schools, and then 2 traditional high schools. The schools that are a little bit of outliers for us are, like I shared, the Hamilton K-8 program, so the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders that stay at Hamilton. And then we have an alternative education option for our high school students at Marin Oaks. And those students could come from any of our high schools, so Novato High or San Marin. But essentially, more or less, 4 of our elementary schools plus Lou Sutton, half of Lou Sutton's kids, move on to San Jose Middle School. And 3 of our elementary schools plus about half of Lou Sutton's kids move on to Sinaloa Middle School. Then there's a direct transition from San Jose Middle School. Those students all go to by feeder pattern to Novato High School, and then all of our Sinaloa students typically go to San Marin High School. As we all know, there's some opportunities for kids to transfer between those programs. Maybe if you're at San Jose Middle School and you really want to be in the STEM program at San Marin, you can apply for that program and transfer. Or maybe if you're at Sinaloa Middle School and you really want to be in MSA, you can transfer. And of course, there are other very high quality pathways at both schools that kids could want to transfer into and out of. But in general, this is our feeder pattern for our school district, with about half of the schools going to San Jose Middle School and then moving on to Novato High, and about half of our kids going from about half of our elementary schools to Sinaloa and then moving on to San Marin High School. Do people have questions about this now? We can certainly revisit it later. Jen, I think you could probably stop sharing unless we need to pull it back up. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Laura, next with the high-level view of the process for school closure.
I think she's going to be doing some school finance and budget information.
He is financial data. You are right.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can share the information. Oh, Jenna is sharing. Wonderful. Thank you, Jennifer. I was worried I wasn't going to be able to share from my own computer. Thank you, everybody, for your attention. Let me just set the stage a little bit where we're at. As you know, we're right in the middle of the current school year. So the data, the last complete financial data that we have is from last school year, 2019-20. However, we want to take a look at what it costs per student using the current enrollment data instead of an old data. So I just want to set the stage so you can understand the source of the information. Secondly, when we're looking at a cost of a school, what we're looking at is those costs that would be associated with the facility and the school site, and not necessarily the costs that would move with the students as they are transferred to other sites. An example would be possibly food service workers. As you know, the students are moved to other school sites, transferred to other school sites, the needs for meal preparations at those other sites would increase. So therefore, we would need to transfer the food service staff from whichever closed school to a new school. So I just want to set the stage for your understanding of what it means in terms of operating costs. Having said that, when you look at this table here, going across is each school. Hamilton is a TK 8 schools. All the other schools are all elementary, TK through 5th grade, from Loma Verde all the way to San Ramon. The associated costs with each of the sites were we have principal. The assistant principal is only at the Hamilton because they do have a middle school strand on that campus. We have an office managers, office tech. The payroll costs are actually payroll taxes that we pay on our employees. So that would be Social Security tax, their pension, unemployment, workers' comp tax. Those are the tax associated with those different positions. And, it's all lumped in on our system. So we're not able to just break it down by different classification. And then the admin cost there is the total, the subtotal of all those costs that are listed above. One additional cost that is unique to Hamilton that is not due to their middle school strand is the dean. So Hamilton has an assistant principal and also a dean. Two additional FTE above the other elementary school. We have the custodial cost and a library tech. Then we have the utility costs associated with each of the school site. In total, what you want to look toward the bottom of the screen, the total all operating costs for Hamilton is $1,028,843. And the remainders of the elementary schools, the costs range from $555,276 at Loma Verde, all the way to $578,733 for San Ramon. Using that and the 2021 enrollment, current year enrollment, the cost per student range from $1,857 at Hamilton and $1,378 at Loma Verde, all the way to $1,249 at San Ramon. So I don't think I need to go read each specific line item, but I think this is best where I can open it up for any questions from the committee members.
Any questions for Laura?
Yeah, I had a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Hardly.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that. So is there a way that the Hamilton can be broken down between TK to 5 to 6 to 8? Because I think the data looks very skewed. If I understand right, the assistant principal and the dean and all that would typically be only for the middle school. And the cost per student then, actually shows like, 1857 against mostly around the 1500 range. So just that is one question. And then, can you elaborate what the CalPADS is?
CalPAD is the California Longitudinal System, and that is the official system of how we report enrollment to the state.
So that means the number of students that are enrolled at the school.
So the 554 is for just the elementary?
The K-8.
Got it. Yeah, I think it will be best if that can be split between elementary and middle school.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Sylvia, do you have a question, Sylvia?
Yes. Yeah, I also have a question. My question is along the same line as Shrika's, more about Hamilton. I'm kind of curious about how does Hamilton 6 to 8 compare to Sinaloa and San Jose? Okay, and the cost and whatnot, and how many students here are from K to 5 and 6 to 8.
Laura, are you able to answer the question about how Hamilton's per student cost compares to San Jose and Sinaloa?
Yes. If we're looking in total, Hamilton TK8, it is, if we compare straight to the middle school, it is approximately 24% higher cost per pupil than for San Jose, and about 37% higher cost than for Sinaloa. Of course, this is because there is a mix in between the elementary and middle school. So there was a questions regarding the enrollment. If you look at the little footnote at the bottom below the cost per student, you can see the Hamilton Elementary is 414 students, and the middle school, that's grade 6 through 8, is 140 students. How does that compare to San Jose? San Jose have 606 middle school students, and Sinaloa has 801 middle school students.
All right. And just clarify again, I know you mentioned it several times, admin costs and payroll cost, the one that associated with payroll tax and whatnot. That's just for the administrative staff that's listed, right? Or does that include all the teachers?
No teachers, because teachers would follow students, so that's not would not be associated with the site.
Okay, thank you.
Great. I think Mariah, you were next.
Yeah, Sylvia asked my question. I think this is really helpful data. I wasn't aware of the cost difference between the elementary schools versus the K-8. So this is really helpful. Thank you, Sylvia, for asking my question.
Thank you. Steve, did you have a question? I saw you unmuted your microphone.
Oh, I was going to help out with the numbers.
Oh, okay.
Student population, yeah. It's approximately 180 students in our middle school. The rest are elementaries.
Thank you. Shrikala, you have a question?
So one of the major infrastructure upgrades that we did was, putting up the solar panels across all the schools, and I still see a very high electricity charge against every school. So can you throw some light on, why it is so, and especially Hamilton has the highest of the electricity charge.
Laura, do you have any information about?
So I don't have the history of the expenditures in this district, obviously, but in my previous experience with another district and the solar panel, the credits that are generated by solar, because solar never provide for 100% of usage. Usually solars are built to either 75%, 80% capacity of usage and never 100%. So we still paying utilities for the excess, that we need, that are not the difference that's not generated by solar. And also the way with solar work is that we actually get a credit back from PG&E at the end of the year, not during the year. So we don't get a monthly credit. It all get true up. And we either get a credit at the end of the year or we get a billing at the end of the year. So what you're seeing in 1920 is our actual cost for electricity, but part of that could be costs that pertain to the prior fiscal year, 2018-19. And that's a standard billings from PG&E.
And one thing just about Hamilton's campus, it's by far our largest elementary campus. And it is also really a heart of the community out there in Hamilton. They've got a large gym, just powering a large gym. Lights for a large gym that the community uses heavily would have a significant impact on the electric bill. But just the amount of utilization as that campus gets outside of the school day would definitely be a driver of a lot of the things on there, like gas, electricity, custodial supplies, et cetera. Steve?
I just have a thought about also, we have 2 huge preschools at our site. I wonder, Chris, does that fall into this number as well, or do they pay theirs separate? I wouldn't get too in the weeds about that. I think it's just your campus gets a lot of use, and it shows in the electricity bill. It's, that's about all there is, really.
Mary,
Any questions?
you have a question? Sorry.
Yes, I just had a question. So let's say one of the school sites closes, and for the administrative cost, these are also like union employees. So they could, if they're more senior, they could move to another site and they're paying, they cost more than maybe somebody who was at the site originally. I'm not speaking.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. So the principal and the assistant principal are not union employees. They're the highest expense.
Okay.
Our office manager and office tech would be union employees. There's not as massive a discrepancy between more of an entry level person and an experienced office manager. There's certainly some, and you can see that play out across you can see the costs play out across the document here. It looks like the span is from 53,000 to 67,000. Mm-hmm. So not a big impact. Most people are somewhere in the middle. So there would be some impact, but not a significant impact.
Okay. Thank you for
yeah.
Are there any other questions for Laura?
I have one question, not pertaining to this, but generally, is there, or I should phrase it this way, what advantages that the 6 to 8 students in Hamilton have that above and beyond San Jose or Sinaloa? Or I should also put it as what advantages the elementary students have continuing in the middle school. So just to understand what, for the cost that we have, it's pretty high. What are the advantages? Is there something that is provided by Hamilton more than any other middle schools?
So here's what I would say is that Steve could talk about this for the next 6 hours. And I would listen because I love the story, but we're going to give Steve, the long elevator pitch, which is like a minute to a minute and a half, Steve.
Well, Chris, that's a great question. I've been in the district for 22 years, I think now. back when Jan Derby was his superintendent, we definitely saw a trend with our population at Hamilton being very unsuccessful at the large middle schools. They had no sense of belonging, and it was very concerning. So we decided to pull back the lens a little bit and figure out through an equity lens what's going on. And after a lot of discussion with Jan Derby and a school board, we decided to move to a K-8 model because that data has shown that that has a higher success rate. And as Chris says, lo and behold, it does. We're a gold ribbon school in Nevada, which is a cap, a feather in our cap, because all of our subgroups are being served at a high level. And we have seen our kids move on. I think 52 to 56 kids graduating from high school last year, or the year before that, moved off to a 2 or 4 year college. That shows me that our population of students are being well served and prepared for the high school and beyond, and creating a citizens for Nevada who are prepared. There, how's that, Chris?
That was 1 minute and 29 seconds. Well done. No, the truth is I didn't time it, but it was great, Steve. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Any other data points that jump out at people? Steve?
I have a question about Linwood and that, look at the cost per student. Can you break that down for us? Is that just because of the low enrollment?
Yeah. Well, I mean, look at Linwood and San Ramon. Right. I mean, granted, Linwood has the two programs on their campus, but neither of them is particularly more expensive than like dual immersion is not more expensive to run than a traditional program. It really comes down to scale. It's the number of students. The staffing number, the administrative cost number is fairly consistent with the other schools, but you're dividing it by a smaller number. The utilities costs are about the same as the other schools, but you're dividing it by a smaller number. So you result in a bigger number. It's just about the scale. When we talked earlier in this committee work, we just talked about efficiency, right? It's more efficient to run schools that are larger. And that efficiency comes with some trade-offs, but it really shows up when you look at the difference between San Ramon and Linwood, our biggest school and our smallest school. Biggest traditional elementary school and smallest traditional elementary school.
Can I ask one last question on this slide? Is it possible to get this level of data on the NOVA also? Not just NOVA, I mean, I don't remember what the school is called.
Marin Oaks?
Marin Oaks.
Yeah, Marin Oaks, sorry.
We aren't talking about the high schools here, so I don't know that we want to expand our scope to talk about the high schools unless that's something the committee really thinks is helpful.
So I'm trying to see if we are talking about the school district assets and how efficiently it could be used. And since Marin Oaks is not a neighborhood, I'm just trying to see if that is something that we should also look at to see how any consolidation may help with that, because yes, school closure is an outcome of all the discussion, but I remember our original discussion was also to look at the district assets.
That's a great question. That's one of the questions that came up a lot through the elementary school size committee, and they recommended that we look at our use of Marin Oaks to see if we could be more efficient in using it, or even move the district office over to Marin Oaks. And what we found is that the entire Marin Oaks campus is being utilized by a lot of specialized programs. So, and I'll give you some examples. So it's being used by the Marin Oaks High School. It's being used by the NOVA Independent Study Program. It's being used by the Compass Special Day Class Program that's run through the Marin County Office of Education. It's being used by the IT department, the Nevada Unified IT department, uses a portion of the campus. And I could go on and on. But so what we found is that program is actually being used really efficiently. And so it shouldn't be, we actually brought this to the board, and the board decided that we shouldn't be considering alternative uses for Marin Oaks, because we'd have to figure out where we moved all of those different programs to. So it's a great question. It's something we spent a lot of time exploring. And at the end of the day, we decided that it was being used pretty efficiently.
Any other questions? Okay. We move on to 7C. So Chris is going to talk about the high-level view process for school closure now. So we're right on schedule. I think we're 3 minutes early.
Yes. So thank you. Jennifer's going to pull up a screen so I can, or maybe I'm just going to talk off my agenda item. Either way works fine for me. So one of the things that we've committed to is when this committee makes a recommendation to the board about closing a school, we committed to making sure that we learned from some of the experiences that Novato gained when they closed the Hill Middle School. And the biggest feedback that we got from the community wasn't whether or not we needed to close a school or not, but the biggest feedback we got was that it was rushed. And the times were different then. The district was in significant financial distress at the time and needed to make a decision right then. So I don't want to compare times or eras or decisions or say that somebody could have done something better at the time. They did the best they could at the time. But we're in a different situation right now. This is important. It is timely, but we want to learn, and we want to make sure that we give this process enough time that we can help it to be successful. And so, here are some of the bullet points that we commit to as we go through this process. We've got to communicate. Widespread communications with the general community, but even more specifically with those communities that are potentially impacted by the decision. We've got to engage with the community throughout the process. We've got to have public outreach with the impacted communities so they have opportunities to ask questions and provide input to the district about the process. Meetings with families impacted by school closures and their new schools. So we got to remember that not just are the schools that are closed impacted by this decision, but there's also going to be some schools that see increased enrollment on their campuses, kids that used to be on a different school on their campus. We need to reach out to those families and make sure they understand how we're going to be navigating this. We need to work closely with the King Consulting and our board about how we adjust the boundaries for the impacted schools. Again, this is not just the school that's closed, but the school that receives more students. Then we need to start looking at the facilities to make sure that how are we going to use the facility once we go through the school closure process. We need to make that final decision about how we're going to use it. We need to make sure that the schools, particularly the receiving schools, the schools that are going to be receiving more students, are doing outreach to those families and make sure they're building bridges and building connections, building that level of comfort for when their kids have to make that move to the new school. We need to look at the facilities, make sure that the facilities are ready to receive more students and new students. We need to start making new traditions. Every elementary school has its traditions that have lasted for a long time. And I feel like as we merge schools together, that's an opportunity for us to make new traditions and start new things so that it's not just the new kids that have to adapt into a new culture, but there's actually a new culture that's built on that campus supporting the previous students and the new students. We need to support with enrollment options for impacted families. There are going to be some families that don't appreciate this change, and we've got to look at how the transfer process supports them. And then we've got to dive in and make sure that we have a positive start to the school year, 22, 23, when the time comes. So these are some of the things at a high level that we commit to doing as we navigate this process. It's a lot of things on this list. It's a lot of human interactions that need to happen, and so I'm happy that we're sort of heading towards this pandemic receding, so that next year we'll have the opportunities to really be together face to face. But in the event that we can't do that, we've learned that we get high levels of parent and community engagement through meetings like Zoom. So, I mean, one of the positive outcomes of the pandemic is that we can use multiple methodologies to get in front of parents. Some that are comfortable and able to get to meetings in person, some for whom this sort of meeting works better for. But we're just committed to making sure that this hard decision is done as well as it can possibly be done. That's what we're trying to do here. So what questions does anybody have about that? Or additions that we should make, things we should be thinking about?
I have my hands raised. Okay, so I thought one thing is one of the concerns when you start to redraw the school line and merge schools, some of the students will be going farther away for sure, pretty much. So will the district and our school start or provide a program that will provide ride share? Knowing that we may, we're not going to have a school bus program for this, but can we somehow provide a service allowing, them to hook up with other parents that's closer, just kind of help them to get this started, and also help them to work with Marine Transit, see if they will be able to provide something for that. And the other thing might be some kind of fundraising if the student, negotiates special rate for students for bus services if needed, because that would be a big concern. One other thing is we talk about how to have families get together, kind of merge into the new school. So I was wondering if the school will have some new program for the students ongoing, so they can be accepted into the school more and, just through the school years.
Yeah, I think that's one of the key things that we've got to talk about, giving them that opportunity to create those new transitions. And, Sylvia, you didn't touch on something, but you made me think of something that I think is missing from this document and needs to be added to this document is we've got to support our staff, because a lot of our staff members have committed 20, 30 years of their careers to this particular place. And changing a school for a teacher is a significant change. And so I just want to say to our teachers out there, our staff out there, that I apologize for missing that detail. And Sylvia, you gave me the spark that reminded me that should be on this list because it's critically important. So thank you.
Good job.
And to the list of what Sylvia included, we should also look at crossing guards. I know, 2 years back, we reduced the number of crossing guards, and with any closure comes, students that will have to walk farther or bike farther, and that's something that needs to be revisited.
Yep, great point. Thank you.
Okay, I just wanted to let I appreciate all of those comments, and I know that those are really important things. I especially know from being one of the two parents that lives out in West Marin and how important carpooling is and working with other parents to make sure to, get your kids to school and to think about those details. We are not at that point where we need to be thinking about those details yet. We're kind of we're in the schematic design of this, going down to design development, going into implementation. So we really need to be thinking about overall sort of, I guess, just reading the numbers and looking at the numbers and paying attention to that. Every school is going to have a unique situation involving transportation, socioeconomic, makeup, et cetera. And we've got those data points. So maybe in terms of thinking about the time that we have, maybe there's some schools that we can look at based on Rob's, data that will help us to be able to, eliminate some of the schools, or not, eliminate, but have a consensus about what schools are not necessarily those that we are looking at considering. So I appreciate all of those comments. I really do. And I understand them from a very personal perspective. So maybe that's something we could agree to is let those conversations happen with the staff that's going to be, into the next conversations that we're going to be having. But right now we really need to be getting into the bigger picture.
Yeah, and staying really high level. Yeah. Thank you, Meg. If there any more questions, or are we ready to move on to the next topic? We can always come back to this stuff. It's never forever gone. All right, Ali.
Let's keep it going. Yeah, we're still on schedule. Now it'll be talking about detailed NUSD elementary school data and summary for all sites. This is your voice over specialist, Rob Murray.
Oh, he just muted himself. Now, hi, I'm Rob Murray. Thank you for having me here tonight.
It's been someone else the whole time, but no, I think I am here. I'm just going to start this as a slideshow. So is everyone seeing the full screen? And this time, yes, I learned my lesson last week, so no more PDF. We're using the PowerPoint this time. So I think we can see everything that's on my screen. So yeah, this is going to be a look at a lot of the detailed student data that I know the committee was curious about seeing in your discussions last week. And so I sincerely hope that after the inundation of numbers that I'm throwing at you tonight, but that you have everything that satisfies those lingering questions that you had about just diving beyond just the total enrollment and residents of boundaries, and really looking at some of those more specific demographic student makeups. So I'm going to be going through some of the data sets that I know the committee has specifically requested. So free and reduced price lunch eligibility, or free reduced price meals, which I will just be saying FRPM for that population, English learners, and then just a breakdown of total student population by ethnicity. And all of this data is coming from the same student lists that I use to get the enrollment totals, and just with the district provided fields. And all of this was just done by student ID, no names or anything like that. So this is just looking at really the numbers of the students who are associated either by enrollment or by residence with these schools. And then I'm going to give you, after all of that, a summary of the data to date. And this is just really more everything that, to my recollection, we have discussed at some point over this one and the two previous meetings. Just organizing so that instead of you as the committee having to flip around, trying to compare numbers from this chart and that chart, just for all of these various categories of data, just all 8 of the elementary schools are all put side by side in order, so that you can just quickly and efficiently see and compare those data points. So with that said, I'm going to get into the detailed student data from the current school year. And it's come up in our conversations before, just with the impacts of COVID-19, with the increased number of students in the VLAs. There was some concern about how much this year's data was affected. And so we are going to be looking at the previous year, 2019-20 as well. And I will just reconfirm what I have mentioned before, that while there are a few specific differences, the broad trends between those 2 years, as you'll see, especially when we do the data comparisons, are very similar between the 2 years. So what effects there were from the unique conditions that the students are going through this year does not seem to have really significantly affected the level of data analysis that I think a lot of you are hoping to be able to do. So this one you've seen before. So this is just a quick reminder, because I'll be showing you some other matrices in the same style. And instead of showing all the students, we'll just show subsets of particular students meeting certain descriptions or demographics. But what you see on these is that across the top, you have the schools of residence. So you look down you look down a column rather, and you see all the students who live in that boundary, and then you see what school they're actually attending. And this is where it's just significant to mention that Novato Charter and Nova are in here, because when we're looking at the residents, both of those schools have students who predominantly or entirely live within the NUSD boundary, and we want to account for decisions that those residents make in attending those schools for whom the district was able to supply this level of detailed data. And then looking at those rows, going across from left to right, again, you see the schools of enrollment, and then you can look and see which boundary the students live in who are coming to enroll in those schools. And then beneath you have the some of the analysis we've seen before, but just a quick reminder, the ones that we'll be touching on the most going forward. In-migration is just the percentage of all of that school's enrollment that is coming to the school from somewhere outside of its boundary. So I'm just gonna look at Hamilton here. So 20.3, so about 1 in every 5 students who is enrolled in K-5 at Hamilton is coming into the school from one of the other 7 district boundaries. And then the out-migration is looking now at the residents and what percent of those residents who live in that boundary are leaving to enroll in a different district school or Novato Charter or Nova. And so that's where you see the 26.6, just still looking at Hamilton. So of their 406 residents, 26.6 of them are, for whatever reason, enrolling in a different school. And in the net migration, and here's where I'm only kind of emphasizing a lot of this now to hopefully clear up questions when we're looking at similar presentations. This is where we take out the other district's residents. We take out the students who are attending Novato Charter or Nova Education. This is a zero-sum analysis between the 8 schools with boundaries. So if you take all those and total them up, it will come out to exactly 0. So for every student that leaves one boundary and enrolls in another, that's all evening out, but you can see which schools just see that net migration, either much higher or much lower than 0. So again, you've seen this matrix before, but while we're looking at numbers that you've seen before, just wanted to make sure that everyone was fully familiar with how this works. So before we get into more matrices, just a quick analysis of the district's total ethnicity, and then you'll get to see it by school. So again, all of these totals will match what's in that previous matrix, and I'm not going to, in general, this applies to a lot of the presentation. I'm not going to go through and read every number. Laura had the same, I think, basic tactic with her chart because I want to leave as much time as possible for the committee to really be leading this discussion. But just, I will talk enough so that I'm sure everyone understands the data that we're looking at. And so this is really just all of the students who are enrolled in the district. You see the largest concentrations are Hispanic students and white students, each with over 40% of total enrollment. And so those are the 2 that I'll be focusing on with some more precise breakdowns in those matrices. And then at the Novato Charter School, I'm showing it here just because they don't have residents, but just in that enrollment, just so that you can also see that breakdown. And then as we go through that same breakdown in the same order for all 8 of the elementary schools. And again, a lot of this, particularly looking at the white and Hispanic populations, is summarized at the end of the presentation, where you can, instead of having to, again, flip back and forth between all the charts, if you really want to just see which schools have the highest percent of Hispanic enrollment, then that is all laid out in one list for you a little later in the presentation. And then we have 8 more charts, again, 4 on each page, that are looking at the same kind of analysis, but instead of these students who are enrolled at the school, we're looking at the students who live in that school's boundary. And you will see some differences here compared to enrollments, and all of that is just laid out in the same fashion. And now we get into looking at some of these specific populations and doing that same spatial analysis and looking at the matrix. I should also mention, because it will come up later, those bold numbers that you see running diagonally, that is the number of students in this case, the Latinx students who both live in that boundary and attend the school whose boundary they live in. Because that is one thing we want to look at, how many of the students who you would consider the neighborhood kids are actually going to that school. And you have the same, this works the exact same way. You have the residents across the top, the enrollment from left to right, and then the analysis of in-migration, out-migration, and net migration at the bottom. We give you the same analysis for the white student population, the same analysis for the population who is eligible for the free and reduced price meals, the FRPM students, for the English learning population. And then we go through the same exercise for the previous year of student data in 2019-20. And so I'm just going to flip through these, but it is the same initial matrix, the same enrollment by ethnicity, the same residence by ethnicity, and then your same matrix pages for the Latinx, the white, the FRPM, and the English learner students. So then getting to the school site summaries, and just as with the detailed data, we have the 2020-2021 that we're going to show you first. And then you also have the previous year's data in the same format. So we start off, and just want to point out, I have put the word rank on there. I realized once this was already published that I wanted to say this, the intention is not for everyone to add up these like a scoring rank and combine all of them into one giant matrix. This is really for your convenience, just to be able to see, sorting most things from highest to lowest, just how all the schools, the 8 elementary schools in Nevada USD compare to each other. So here we have some of that information from the top level matrix, the total enrollment, the total residents, and then that diagonal bold numbers that I had pointed out to you, the number of residents who are enrolled at the school. And then just a quick throwback to some of the data that we looked at the last meeting when we looked at those ideal capacity numbers and the seats available just in the current year. Then we look at the percent out migration, which again is those residents of that boundary who are enrolling elsewhere, the percent in migration, so your enrollment in that school that's coming from elsewhere, and then that net migration, so just between the boundaries, which schools relatively have more students going out than coming in, or coming in than going out. And then we're just going to go through, we're taking the capacity slide, or the section out, but otherwise now for each special population that the committee has expressed some interest in seeing, we're just going to go through that same sequence of charts. So you have the total FRPM enrollment at each site, and then within each site's boundary, the total FRPM residents, and then the FRPM residents who are enrolled in their local school's boundary. And then the percent of each school's enrollment that qualifies for FRPM, the percent of each boundary's residents, and then that net migration again. So which schools bring in more FRPM students than they have going somewhere else, and vice versa. And then we're going to go through, and I think everyone sees the pattern, but we'll just walk through this quickly. We have the English language, the English learner enrollment, the English learner residents, and those number of residents enrolled at their local school, and then the same percent of enrollment, percent of residents, and net migration. And then the same analysis for Latinx students with enrollment and residents, and where the residents, where schools enroll the highest number of their residents, and then the percent enrollment, percent residents, and that net Latinx migration. And then with the white students, the same analysis with total enrollment in residents, residents enrolled, percent total enrollment, percent total residents, and net migration of white students. And so all of this is sequenced from, just sorted really from high to low, so that it is my intention to be convenient for the committee to be able to see and compare data and really to decide what you think the most significant data points are that will feed into, as Chris said, and as everyone I think acknowledges, the very difficult decision, but that I think we have agreed does need to be made. And then the 1920 data, I'm not going to belabor this, but you have the equivalent data for 1920. What you'll notice really looking at 2020 versus 2019 is that most of these, you might have a couple of lines that swap places here and there, but generally you'll see that this is all the same order or very close to the same order as what you saw in the 2020-21 data. So again, I don't think anyone needs me to repeat everything that I just said. It's the same data. And then I fully anticipate that there might be some specific points that during your discussion, I will be on standby to go and explain any data that people are curious about knowing a little more about, or just confirming why do you think this might be. But I really want, again, the time to be from the committee deciding what the most interesting data is and not me talking necessarily about all of it at length. So I think that is all that I wanted to present at this time.
All right, thank you, Rob. We want to get into that data, but I think, Jen, you said that we have some residents that had some questions. Maybe we tackle those first, and then we can dive in on 8 regarding Rob's data.
Correct. So is it, Ali, are you saying for the committee, you want to close item 7D and move on to item 8A?
Yes, let's do that.
Okay, perfect. So everyone, we have a 20-minute public comment period. And right now we currently have 7 attendees that have raised their hand to have a public comment during 8A. I'm going to let them in one at a time. Each attendee, you'll have 3 minutes to speak to your item, and then please be cognizant of your 3 minutes. We'll let you know when you get to 3 minutes that your time is up, and then we will demote you back down to an attendee. So Erin, you will be the first to be promoted to a panelist to be able to comment. And Erin, you should be in as a panelist. There you are. If you can unmute. Thank you. David, can you please start the timer?
We good?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Hi to all the committee members and Superintendent Koska. I want to first acknowledge that as difficult as it may be, choosing to close a school that has low enrollment and high operational costs is the fiscally responsible thing to do. I want to recognize and thank the committee for putting in the hard work and working together to make the right decision. I'm here tonight to advocate for Lou Sutton in hopes that it stays off the short list you will decide on tonight. Lou Sutton has been a neighborhood school since 1959. Many of my friends attended Lou Sutton as kids and now have their own children attending. Lou Sutton, although not one of the largest schools, has a tightly knit community of families, teachers, and support staff. We serve some of the most vulnerable students. 57% are of Hispanic or Latino descent, and 61% are socioeconomically disadvantaged. On an average day, 1/3 of our students walk or bike to school. If Lou Sutton were to close, it would make it exponentially harder for families to get their students to school, which could affect attendance rates and the student safety. Because of our population, Lou Sutton receives a significant amount of Title I funding. 60% of our students qualify for the free and reduced lunch program, as you just saw. These funds have positively impacted student success by allowing us to provide various supports for our students that other elementary schools in our area have to otherwise find the funding for, whether that be through the PTA or other sources such as grants. It also allows us to provide outreach to parents of our students. If such a large number of Title I funds were diluted and spread between other local elementary schools, what impact would this have on the district financially? My final point around Lou Sutton is its location. We're mere blocks from downtown. We're actually the closest of all the elementary schools to the downtown area. Taking that away would have a direct impact on families choosing Novato as a place to live. At the second meeting of this committee, Rob shared data about several new builds happening in the downtown area in the near future. If I'm remembering right, there are projected to be more than 80 students that would be slated to attend Lou Sutton from just one of those downtown builds. That's 3 classrooms worth of students that, if closed, the district could lose out on. Please take this information into consideration tonight. The population we serve, our location, and the fact that Lou Sutton has been a constant in our community for more than 60 years. Lou Sutton closing would leave a gap in our community during a time when families and students need familiarity and community the most. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. And now I will, sorry, there's a little behind the scenes work, so I just don't want to remove anyone from the meeting. So give me a second as I promote and demote people. Misha, you will be next. I will be promoting you. And there you are. You will have 3 minutes. Oops.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Sorry about that. Okay, so thank you to all the committee members and Superintendent Koska and consultants for getting all this information out to the public. And I know it's not an easy job. And like Erin said, I share the same sentiment that it is the fiscally responsible thing to do. I too am a Lou Sutton parent. I have 2 children there with a 3rd one in the pipeline. And beyond my own personal feelings about the school closing, I really echo Erin's, everything she shared about how our population would suffer from the closure of Lou Sutton. And to kind of help illustrate that a little bit, in our most recent ELAC meeting, we had a couple parents, when we brought this up, we talked about how this would affect you, how you would feel about our school closing and what it means to you. And I have a couple of direct quotes that I would like to share. One mother says, "This is very sad. I hope Lou Sutton doesn't close. My son went to Lou Sutton. It's a great school. Teachers and staff are great. And unfortunately, my little ones might lose the chance of going to Lou Sutton." And mind you, this is translated from Spanish to English, so there might be a couple words that are off here. The second parent said, "We hope Lou Sutton doesn't close. It is a good school. This is my daughter's first year. She's very happy. She has a good teacher, Miss Miller." So those are just a couple quotes. Some of them, we encouraged them to come talk, but didn't feel comfortable. But we want to be a voice for everybody because we can. And my last thought I think that I'd like to share is that it's pretty obvious that we serve one of the most vulnerable populations, and we have some of the lowest operating costs. So to me, it's pretty clear that it would be a real disadvantage to these populations if we were to close. Thank you guys so much for your time.
Thank you. Hold on 1 second. Sorry about that. Melissa, I will be promoting you. Yep, there you go. Go ahead and start the timer.
Committee members, I'm here tonight to speak on the importance of not closing Lou Sutton Elementary School. I'm a parent to both 5th and TK students. I am one of those parents who pre-COVID was dependent upon my older daughter being able to safely ride her bike to school so that I could drop my other daughter off at preschool and get to work on time. Had this not been an option, I would have had to either pay for costly before care or be late to work every day. I fear that this closure could mean that my younger child, when able, will not have this opportunity in being able will not have this opportunity, being that she will have to cross many main streets to get to the other elementary schools, as well as the additional 2 miles she would have to travel. When moving to downtown Novato in 2014, being able to walk to school was a huge draw on why we chose this area as our home. Being able to walk to shops, restaurants, and farmers markets were also an added bonus and solidified the deal for us. In 2011, our downtown community faced its first school closure, that of Hill Middle School. Reasons were similar: to recoup some $200,000 in administrative costs. At the time, it was noted that the closure was not due to academic or social failings, but simply because of its central location. How is it that we are here 10 years later in the same position, even looking at a school in the same location? Given how many families that have already left NUSD, how would closing our only downtown elementary school attract any new families to this area and help keep our downtown what it has been, a tight-knit, family-friendly neighborhood? I urge you to consider looking at outer elementary schools more closely so as to not divide our Lou Sutton community in half and turn our downtown into the hub of shutdown schools. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Melissa. I will be promoting Elena. Hold on one moment. Elena, you should be in. Great. David, can you start the timer?
Hi, everyone. My name is Elena McAlpine, and I have 2 girls who have gone through Lou Sutton Elementary School. We are a really special community that I beg you to keep open for every child who lives in this area. We serve a special community of both English learners and disadvantaged Title I students. We have been able to provide for these kids in a way, because of our Title I status, that no other school in our area has been able to do. Children who come to Lou Sutton not only feel welcome and loved and part of a community, but they also receive benefits from being a Title I school that they wouldn't at other schools. We have special teachers and techs who help them read and learn English. We provide to a community here that I think if they were displaced would not be able to ride their bikes. They would not be able to walk. They would not be able to get to school in the same way that they do coming to Lou Sutton. This school has been a community since the late 1950s. We are a special place with a beautiful garden, a beautiful community with murals, and all sorts of special amenities that it would just be a terrible shame to lose. So please do not close Lou Sutton Elementary School.
Thank you. And I will be promoting Christina. One moment. Great. Christina, you can unmute yourself. There you go.
Hi, sorry. Okay. Good evening, 7-Eleven committee members and Superintendent Koska. Thank you for your time and dedication to this process. I wholeheartedly understand that this is not an easy undertaking. I am speaking this evening as a Lou Sutton parent. I have children in both 3rd grade and kindergarten. When school closures were discussed as a possibility a few years back, Lou Sutton and Rancho were put on the school closure list. The explanation then, and the explanation from district staff now, which was explained in a recent February PTA meeting, was that geographically, central schools are more favorably identified. Lines can be redrawn to move students from central or middle locations to the perimeter schools in a city. reasonable explanation. However, I have come to question this narrative. Why can't the reverse also be true? Students in perimeter schools could just as easily move into schools in the geographic middle. Lines could be redrawn to support a different narrative. This latter concept perhaps does not support the schools that have historically been more protected in the community. Meanwhile, schools such as Lou Sutton are left wondering why. As committee members, I implore you to look at this with a new lens. Incorporate our diverse community's needs into your decision-making process to ensure an equitable outcome. It is integral to understand that Lou Sutton serves one of the most diverse populations in Novato. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Christina. Next, I will be promoting Carrie Strasser.
Hi, thank you. Oh.
David, please start the timer.
Can I go? Okay. Good evening. My name is Carrie Canuli, and I'm a fourth grader at Lou Sutton. My daughter has gone to Lou Sutton since kindergarten. I am speaking here today because I do not want Lou Sutton to be the potential school site to close. Right now, my daughter has to walk to and from school because both my husband and I are working. However, we are beyond lucky to live close enough that she can walk to and from school with 3 of her friends. I'm not sure what we would do if she wasn't able to walk. There are other families and students that also have to walk or bike to school that would be potentially have to figure out a new means of transportation to and from school. This change could make it way more difficult for kids to get to school, not to mention it could have a direct impact on daily attendance and student safety. I'm asking you all to please take this into consideration before putting Lou Sutton on the potential school closure list. Closing Lou Sutton would be devastating for my family, students, families, and the wonderful staff. We love students. We love Lou Sutton. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Sandy will be next. I will promote you.
Hello, everybody. Again, I am a parent of another Lou Sutton kindergartner, as well as my counterparts that have all shown up tonight. I have, like I said, I have a kindergartner and a younger son that will also attend Lou Sutton. One of the things that really stands out to me in all of this is, we have one of the largest populations of children that come from, an economically disadvantaged background. And this year we got Meera Patel as this awesome president that has really getting us in stride and getting us to where we need to be and working with these families and these children that are part of our community. Secondly, I would encourage are you looking at traffic patterns, and are you looking at some of the other schools that are in a one way out and one way in, one way out only, to whereas a lot of people have mentioned Lou Sutton is very centrally located right off of, a main road in the center of town. And traffic congestion, with the added population would be much less versus some of the other schools, some of the other surrounding schools that, like I said, are kind of a one-way in and a one-way out. Again, as a parent that loves this community and loves this school, I ask you to highly consider the community that you would be taking away something that is so important to these, not only the children that are, like I said, economically disadvantaged, but all of our children. My children love this school and they love the friends that they've made. They love the diversity that, they get every single day at Lou Sutton. And to take that away, I think would be a terrible loss, not only in my family, but in all of our community. Thank you.
Thank you. It looks like we have time for one more comment in the 20 minutes. And we did have some Spanish-speaking people in the chat, I think that they have been responded to, Meg. Meg is the bilingual one here. I apologize. I am not. Can you confirm that they have been responded to or not?
Yes, I've responded to Claudia and Rosa, and then I've invited anybody who is Spanish speaking to make comments, and I just need the link, and I'll put that, or you can put that in the chat, and then we're all set.
Okay, and going forward, we will absolutely have a translator here for future meetings. So I apologize that I didn't have that ahead of time. Karina, you will be promoted. You will be our last public comment speaker for this item, 8A. That being said, like Meg said, I will put the link in the chat. It's on our website at NUSD.org/711. All those public comments are then forwarded to the committee, so you can do that anytime. We thank everyone for your time this evening. So hold on 1 second. Where did you go, Karina? Sorry. Hold on 1 second. There you are. All right, Karina, you should be in as a panelist if you want to unmute yourself and there. And David, can you start the timer?
Hi. Hello.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to chime in on my support for Lou Sutton from me and my wife, Karina. We love the school. My daughter is graduating out of Lou Sutton this year, but both my kids transferred over from a private school and they both thrived at Lou Sutton. It's a great community and it would be a really terrible disservice to close that school. So we just want to chime in. I'm glad there's so much support for Lou Sutton. Thank you.
Thank you. Ellie, go ahead and proceed with item 8A. We're done with public comment.
Okay. There's a lot of love for Lou Sutton. Let's talk about 8A and see if any of the committee members had any questions regarding, I guess, Chris's, Laura's, or Rob's presentation.
I have one ask.
Sure.
Regarding Lou Sutton and Linwood. I'm looking at slide 4 of Rob's presentation.
Rob, do you want to pull up your slide so that we can run through any of the data points that the committee has questions on? Thank you. Go ahead, Sylvia.
Okay. So
I'm sorry.
No worries. So both Lou Sutton and Linwood have the most outflows, and obviously every one of those should have had a transfer request. Is there any data around why there are so many transfers? Is that a reason that gets tracked as part of the transfer request? Understand the Linwood situation, but still I would like to know if there is any data around the transfers.
We don't track the reasons for the transfers. Linwood is a little bit different scenario because Linwood is is transitioning to a dual immersion school. We have allowed families to transfer out of Linwood if they were not interested in participating in the dual immersion program. So it should be noted that prior to the dual immersion program, Linwood also had high outflow. I can't say if it was the same as it is currently, but I do know that sped up a little bit when we added we made it easier for families to transfer out of Linwood when we added the dual immersion program.
And so just to be clear, there's no way that data can be collated.
I don't believe we track that data.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sylvia?
Thank you. My question was the same about Lou Sutton's. Just the question has nothing to do with the decision, but the outflow. I have heard part of the reason is also because of Lou Sutton. Students are currently going to Sinaloa and also go to San Jose. Mm-hmm. So some of the parents choose to, to ensure that kids will go through the same path, decided to transfer their kid to another school just so that they will stay from elementary through middle school. So that's what I heard about. And secondly, really is a comment about this process. I know we have to leave by 7:30, but I want to make sure, I feel this is a very important decision the committee is making. And I also respectfully disagree with Meg. I feel like in this process, for example, the reason why I asked about whether the school NUSD will be supporting, have a service to transfer, to help kids to go from one place to the other. The reason is because there's a lot of concern in the community about the whole process. And I feel like through this process that we're going through right now, we need to be able to make sure the parents that are listening and go back and discuss are comfortable enough with the process we're going through. So if I feel like if we have to rush through and the committee member have questions and are not allowed to ask because our time is up, then that's a disservice to the committee as well to the community. So that's just my comment on that. Now I lose my train of thought, so I'm going to let the next person go.
I do want to add that our 7:30 stop time is something that we've done our best to agree to as a norm for the committee, and norms are norms. They're not something we always follow. They're things that we normally follow. That's why it starts with norms. So I don't think anybody's saying we need to rush or not give people the opportunity to ask questions. We take, our board meeting went till 12:30 in the other night. So, we are not going to rush through this. But it is also important to track time, because sometimes if you don't track time, then, you lose control of time, and it becomes disrespectful to the committee. So we'll balance that. I'm confident of that.
I agree. Thank you.
Mary, you're next.
Yes, thank you. I just had a question on the net migration out. Can we get a little bit, I just want to kind of try to figure out the reasons why, and looking at maybe the school site budgets, and then compare that with the testing results. I know it was presented at the board meeting last week, which was very enlightening, but it would be nice to kind of see if we can kind of uncover why certain sites are losing more students. And then if the school budgets that they have are they able to achieve the testing results or not?
One of the things that I would say about our schools that are losing students is they're typically our Title I schools. So they're typically our schools with the highest budgets. So I don't think you would find a budget trend to follow that. We could certainly pull that data. We wouldn't have it tonight. But the other part of your statement was about test results. One thing that we know is that, and this is why the state of California has prioritized additional funding and the nation have prioritized funding for students who are living in poverty, for students who are socioeconomically That's living in poverty. Socioeconomically disadvantaged students who are English learners, students who are foster youth, or students who are homeless. We receive additional funding for all those students because it's more challenging to educate them, and because the state has seen that they're falling behind. And what we see at our Title I schools is that, and that's why we have the additional revenue to try to offset that. But it's common that those scores are a little bit lower at those schools. So I think that's what would show up in the data, is that our schools with more poverty and more English learners, we haven't done a good enough job of serving them. But it isn't due to a lack of budget from the state or from the nation. I mean, of course, I think relative to the other schools, because they have larger budgets relative to the other schools. Now, I believe all of our education system is underfunded, particularly when you look across Marin County and look at our basic aid neighbors. But that's a story for another day, unfortunately.
Chris. Tina, you're next.
Okay, there we go. I was looking at the data from tonight, and then I pulled some of the information from the previous meeting so that I can look at a map of how all the school districts interconnect in response to some of the comments from the Lou Sutton parents. And then I also, and again, these are rough numbers, but I took the difference in the numbers between the enrollment numbers we were given tonight and the maximum, not maximum capacity, the optimal capacity for enrollment at the schools. And so I just want to rattle off the numbers I got as a talking point. And I also want to say that some of the schools that are almost at maximum capacity may be that way going back to, I want to say 2008, when we had No Child Left Behind, because there was a period of time in the district where students were allowed to transfer out of schools that didn't have test scores that met the No Child Behind requirements. And I know I'm going back, like a decade or more now, but there have been so many variables. I've been in the district for over 40 years. My kids went through Novato schools. So I remember all these different changes. And I think that what we're looking at in terms of closing an elementary school is incredibly painful. Just listening to the parents from Lou Sutton, I can appreciate why they would organize and call in and just make a point of sharing with us how they are helping so many kids and how difficult it would be for those kids to start over again. And I also think that may apply to kids in every single school. So I don't want to appear heartless and kind of doing the numbers, but I thought it might help to start there. The school that had the maximum capacity right now in terms of what it could hold and the new numbers for how many kids it has was Pleasant Valley. They still have 10 spaces. San Ramon has 19. Olive has 26. Loma has 77. Lou Sutton has 95. Rancho has 101, and then Hamilton has 234. And my understanding about Hamilton is that it has the greatest capacity to expand, to add more students. When I look at the map of where all the schools are located, I can appreciate why the previous committee was looking at a cluster of schools that had access to other nearby neighborhood schools as a way of trying to soften that blow. When we talk about kids being able to ride their bike to school, I remember that was one thing we looked at when we first moved to Novato and started having kids. So if I look at the clusters, and the thing that's difficult here is not being certain what the impact would be, but if Hamilton can take the largest number of new students as a school that would be added to. And if Hamilton also has an incredible ELAC and DLAC base, if I'm saying that correctly, a lot of support for parents of reduced lunch and English language learners and socioeconomically disadvantaged, should we begin to look at just the numbers of students that could move from one school to another? And should we also begin to look at the advantages of if a school is allowed to maintain its place? For example, if Hamilton stayed, how much could it do then to support populations of nearby kids? Now, I understand that the biggest obstacle with Hamilton is you've got to go across the freeway. And for some families, that's going to be difficult. And we're not offering buses necessarily in an elementary school. In general, that's difficult. So then what I tried to figure out was, of the schools that have less enrollment based on optimal capacity, are some of them adjacent to each other so that there could be a sharing? So, and this is not saying that this should be the school that is closed, but for example, if Rancho closed, its kids could easily go to Lou Sutton and Linwood. If Linwood closed, its kids could easily go to Lou Sutton and Rancho or PV. Like, when I look at the map and I look at the numbers, it at least allows me to consider what schools are within close proximity. If I look at schools just in terms of ones that are already at maximum capacity, it makes me question whether are we concerned with equalizing demographics, because those three schools are also predominantly white. And I don't know how much of an issue that is for the community, because the percentage of Hispanic families in our community is much larger than the percentages in those schools. So it's a lot of stuff, but those are the things I was looking at.
Thank you, Tina. Nihad, I think you raised your hand and lowered it. So go ahead right now if you'd like to speak.
I'm okay to wait until after the people you put ahead of me. That's totally fine.
It's fine.
Okay. That's fine. I have so many thoughts based on some of the comments that other board members have made. Because Tina just spoke, something you said actually flagged a thought for me. You mentioned Hamilton and that it would be a concern about crossing the freeway. When we look at the demographics in Hamilton and the students that are transferring out of Hamilton, they're predominantly white and they are crossing the freeway. Anyone who transfers out of Hamilton is crossing a freeway. So it's a concern for the economically disadvantaged because of transportation. I think it should be a priority for us to make sure that those schools, demographics and their transportation is looked at. When we look at the schools on the fringe, they have the less economically disadvantaged families, and they're going to be the ones that have the most access to getting around town and transferring to different schools. Mary mentioned or had a question in regards to budgets per student in the schools. I had a thought, while it doesn't, there's not a huge discrepancy, I think, in the federal funding for the individual schools. I think there is an overall difference in parental funding in the schools. So that leads itself to a massive inequity within the schools. So that's also something I think we should consider. I do think that the racial breakdown of the schools is something that we should look at, because I was actually kind of shocked and found it a little disconcerting, the direction that some of our schools are going in. And if there was a way for us to maybe push us in a better direction as a community, I think that would be worth considering. That's all.
Thank you. Betsy, you were next.
I also want to just say I appreciate hearing everyone's viewpoints, and I value everyone's ideas and sentiments. It seems, again, just like a very hard thing to grapple with. I want to make two comments. One, just because Nihad, is that how you say your name, Nihad? Okay. Just brought up, I thought it would be a good question before, when you said like the cost per student, to actually maybe get some kind of data as to like how much family or PTA fundraising supplements and how, I don't know how each school, how much money each school raises and what those go to, and somehow figure out how to equate what that does look like cost per student, if that makes sense. Because I do, again, say, I think that we need to look a lot at equity. So that's one question. And then my next question, now this might be off kind of topic, but there was a written public statement, a couple written public statements that talked about a different solution in all of this, and it being that the solution might not necessarily be closing an elementary school, but looking at remodeling, which is a great task. So I don't even know if that is possible or up for discussion, but remodeling the middle schools and adding the 6th grade to the elementary schools. So it's a K-6 model for the elementary schools, and then a 7-8 middle school. And I don't know if we can find out if that's fiscally, if there's any fiscal advantage to that.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk to that if that would be helpful.
Yeah, that would.
So the idea of adding 6th grades to the elementary schools and then just having 7th and 8th grades at the middle schools would it would put more students on our elementary campuses. It would decrease the capacity on our elementary campuses. It would dramatically decrease the number of students on our middle school campuses and would make them dramatically less efficient. It would increase the cost per pupil of our students on the middle school campuses. It would not achieve the goal that we're trying to achieve. It would just, it's like moving the puzzle pieces around, but not really putting them together. I think that's part of the reason why I wanted to share the flow chart of students tonight, because it just shows that that as students migrate across our district, there's a logical path for that now. We narrowed down that flow when we got rid of Hill Middle School. The district believes, and this committee recommended, that we need to close a school in order to be more efficient. Just moving students around to different campuses and using the campuses differently doesn't achieve the money. Now, if the idea was then we just had 7th and 8th grade on one middle school campus, that would be something that would probably cost us to increase the capacity at one of our middle schools to be able to handle all of our middle school students, would be a $30 million project, I'm guessing, something like that. And so obviously that would be contrary to us being fiscally responsible in this decision. So unfortunately, that idea doesn't really pass muster now. I mean, one thing we could have done with a $220 million school bond is we could have gotten rid of a high school, and we could have had one 3,000 student high school, but that would have been tough to push forward in the community. I don't know that that would be a good idea, but that would have helped us achieve some operational savings and would have cost most of the school bond to do. But I think given where we are now, I don't see that as being a solution that actually saves the district money. It just kind of moves the puzzle pieces around a bit. Unfortunately, I wish there was a solution like that worked well. And your other question was about PTA funding, Betsy, so I want to touch on that. Mm-hmm. This is the constant, without a doubt, we have Title I schools that struggle to raise funds for the most part, with Hamilton and the foundation that they've developed at Hamilton being the exception to that rule. most of our PTAs at our Title I schools struggle to raise funds, understandably, and work very hard and struggle to achieve that goal. And our higher socioeconomic status schools do work hard and do raise those funds to offset some of the state and federal money that they don't receive. It's a constant struggle, and it's a frustration of the families that have to work hard to raise those revenues to offset some of those differences. And it's a constant struggle for the other schools to actively engage their communities and get them raising some funds on their campus. So this is hard work. I don't think that us looking at those budgets is going to help us make this decision. I think that's, we have lots of data. One of the things we found at the elementary school size committee is people kept asking for more and more data. The reality is we have lots of data, and we can keep distracting ourselves with other data sets. We could talk about data for the next 2 years with different requests or different angles to look at the same data. At the end of the day, we have a lot of data available to us to help us make this really hard decision. So, while we could get it, I don't think it would be helpful.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy.
We're next.
First off, thanks to Rob, for a lot of data. It's almost like death by 1,000 paper cuts now. So yes, thanks for that. But I think this is important data, right? It gives a very good picture of our ethnicity, and which schools are having, more space, and our free, lunch students where they are. So it's very good data. And the contrary to that is that you have a lot of balls to now balance and make sure that the decision is the right decision. So one of the things is very interesting in why, Chris shared this, earlier in the meeting about the feeder school and also the ethnicity of the makeup of the those feeder schools. And that's something that I know, a couple people talked about that already. It's very critical that we keep in sight the next, the next phase from moving from elementary to middle school, that when our decision does not make a middle school, more concentrated with one ethnicity than the other. It is very critical. I know, there are a lot of case studies about our scenarios about and examples of this happening in other places too. So it's very critical that we keep that in mind, and somehow, which is why the data is great, but now we have to look at all the data in different parts to understand that. There was also another comment that was interesting about projects, and Rob had shared that data too earlier. That's something to look at, because what we have seen today, and probably more fresh in our mind, is what the makeup is today and where you have students. And we need to also look at projects that are coming up and where there will be students coming from. That is also critical, because again, closing one school should not bring another issue later about finding, okay, can this school now accommodate the additional students that will be coming out of these development projects down the line? So that's another critical, data point to look at. And I don't know if, I'm not asking for additional data, but looking at the 21-22 budget, is the cost per student remaining the same? about the same? Is it, or is there any dramatic change in that? That's something that would be good to know if it is not changing, because we've seen some big swings between years too, a few years too. So that, that's one thing, is that changing dramatically? I think that's basically what I had, but I have one request, is if Rob can provide some the data in a Excel spreadsheet or something like that.
Yeah, I actually want to mention a couple of things. And one of them is, yes, I certainly have no problem providing all of this data in Excel. We can get that out to people. But then as a follow-up, it triggered something that I had wanted to mention when you asked about, for example, kind of looking at then the scenarios that we can start spinning out from a school that might be closed at the elementary level, such as the ethnic makeup of the middle school population, how that might shift, or some of the boundary and transportation to school. And that, just circling back around to our previous meeting, is actually one reason that we wanted to get to that shorter list, just because that is the kind of really intensive, I think, prohibitive to do across the board work that once we have that short list, that's exactly what I'll then begin scrambling, if you can reach that decision tonight, to produce for you. Because again, I'm taking notes, I'm hearing the kinds of things that people are raising questions about. And if I can only have a couple of schools for which to provide that next level of analysis, that is, I think, from my understanding, the goal of the process. So I just wanted to offer that. But yes, as far as the Excel data, also no problem. Jennifer, I'm sure we can arrange a way to make that happen.
Absolutely. Thanks, Shrikala. Sylvia, next.
Okay, thank you so much. So I have, first I agree with Chris. It will be hard to do the, eliminate one similar or San Jose, but that's one thing. I have a couple of questions. One, special programs. If we close school, for example, if we choose to close Linwood, then the Spanish, the emerging dual language immersion program cannot be moved to another school. For example, maybe Hamilton is closer. I do understand that will be we will have concerns about students that live around Linwood, where they may have to end up going to possibly Rancho or not. But the question on that one is that can that program be moved to a different program?
So one thing that we find in our schools is that there's really very few, if any, programs that can't be moved. We have moved programs before. Usually they're smaller programs. I mean, the dual immersion program at Linwood is a big program. So we'd have to be thoughtful about how and where we were to move that program. And the board would have to make a determination about whether or not it's still committed to that program. The reality is that we hoped that a couple of things would happen at Linwood as a result of having the dual immersion program there. And one of those things was that we would attract the Linwood neighborhood kids into the program and keep them on the Linwood campus, and that we would draw kids from other other schools into Linwood. We've had some degrees of success at both of those, and we've struggled in some ways with that program. And so, if we were to make the decision to close Linwood, and I'm not saying that's where we are, but just hypothetically, we would need to go to the board and say, is this a program that we stand behind? Is this program that we reduce? Is this a program that we move to another campus? So those are all future decisions that we would have to make. But I don't think we can say that we can't close a certain school because they house a certain program.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And also Linwood has a pretty high per student cost over there. Mm-hmm. My other question is that, Steve, you probably want to cover your ears. My other question is, we have a suggestion of merge San Jose and Sinaloa. And here I'm sitting here today finding out, we actually have 3 middle schools because K-8 in Hamilton actually are supporting staff for, one assistant principal and another one is a dean. So the question is, can we somehow move the program from Hamilton? And maybe Hamilton will absorb some more elementary school, including the Spanish emerging dual and language emerging program, and stay as a K-6 school, and then have the middle school going to the other 2. Sorry, Steve, we have to discuss our options.
Quite all right. I can defend that to the end, but Chris Koska is watching me tightly tonight.
Yeah, so what I would say is that could certainly be a recommendation of this committee, that we continue, that we explore what happens with the interactions between, Hamilton, K-8 and San Jose. One of the things that we know is that when we look at our enrollment projections for San Jose Middle School, it continues to decrease. And that's a little bit of a scary thing for us for all the same reasons we're talking about this conversation. So, this committee doesn't need to just have one recommendation. It could have multiple recommendations. And one of the recommendations could be to ask the district to explore how we deal with that impending challenge that is before us. So thank you for thinking of that, Sylvia.
Before we go to the next question, I'm wondering if we can kind of tally up where we think we stand, and if there's a consensus already, then we don't need to keep the conversation going. And I don't know where anybody stands. I don't know anything about anything, but it would be a good idea to get a feeler out there. I mean, we're going to go past 7:30, but I think this is a good time to at least get a pulse on where everybody is.
Yeah, I have to agree with you, Ollie. Thank you for bringing that up. And also, we are kind of doing a couple steps back too. If everyone remembers, we did vote on closing an elementary school. So I mean, it's definitely in the purview to make changes. But anyway, so go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
Well, let's start with you. What are your 2 closures or recommendation?
Well, I guess I would say that I think that some off the table are San Ramon, Pleasant Valley, and Loma Verde. I don't think we're talking about them per se. Are we? I mean, that would be that would help eliminate and kind of narrow it down. So those are 3 that aren't being considered.
I wouldn't say that necessarily.
Yeah, let's just go with what you think should close or what realignment you think. Just give it to us.
Can I ask a question? The other 3 have hands up. Do you have any question that you think might change the outcome?
Okay.
So let's have, we got 4 questions, and maybe we get after these 4, it gives people a couple of minutes to think of their answers.
Do we have to adjourn with like individual decisions or recommendations? Is that how we're agreed to adjourn?
No, I'm just going to go down, and if I don't know what anybody thinks, nobody else knows. So we're just trying to get a feel of where we are. If you don't have an opinion, then that's fine. But at least we kind of get a feel of where we're leaning.
Okay.
So it sounds like we've got a couple more questions, and I want to address what Betsy just asked was, do we need to have a decision before we adjourn for the night tonight? And the answer is no. But if we want to keep moving forward with this process, we want to be able to, so we have a long time between this meeting and the next meeting. And we want to be able to use that time really, really well. And right now we've shared with you all the data that really is needed to be able to make an informed decision tonight. And so what we're hoping we can do with that big gap of time between now and our next meeting is turn Rob loose to really get in the weeds on a couple of school sites, to really bring that information back to this committee so that when we meet again after this break, that we have the information needed to make that next decision. Because then if you remember, we have meetings about a week apart once we come back from this break. So if we push this decision off tonight, then that gives Rob a week to do all that work that he needs to do the deep dive onto those other two school sites. So we do not need to do this tonight, but for just a workflow process, I think that would be best. And I know this is a hard decision, but I think we have the data that we need to make the decision. So with that said, let's get to the last 4 questions, the people that had their hands raised, and then we'll see if we can move it forward.
Okay. So Jennifer.
Okay. For one, I want us to make sure we look at the programs. I know, Chris, you said there's not very many programs we can't move, but I do know at my site in particular, there is one program that will get lost that cannot be transferred over. And I'm not sure if the other couple sites that get that grant will lose that also.
I'm sorry, what are we talking about?
LEAP, the after school program.
Mm-hmm. So
that will be gone.
We don't know that wouldn't be able to transfer, but
I'm sorry?
But we would have to explore that. We'd have to get you that. We'd have to get the committee that answer.
I've already been told. I don't know if there's a loophole, but
okay.
I'm just saying, not just at Linwood, but if there's any other programs like those at other sites, because those greatly would impact our communities around us.
Okay.
The second is the dual immersion program. It's not fully immersed yet. And where would it go? I mean, that's a question that, what I know you said the board could decide to dissolve it, but then there could be an issue with that, along with the, was it Linwood and Olive that are getting major projects done over the summer. And again, I know we're going to look at that data later when we have 2 schools to look at. But if we do pick the 2 schools tonight, and then we get the data, and then we realize, well, this seems really odd with just the 2 schools, can we go ahead and add or switch out for another school and see what that's going to look like? Or are our choices that we make tonight and we're not going to be able to explore other options?
So here's what I would say is this is the work of the committee, right? We don't make the committee do anything. The committee does this work. The people signed up to be on this committee to do this work. And if we end up having 2 school sites and the committee can't end up making a recommendation to close either of those school sites, and they think they need to look at a 3rd school site, I think that would be fine. I don't anticipate that would happen. But in the world of hypotheticals, I think that could happen.
So I don't think we wanted to maybe look at some ways to eliminate some questions around schools that we don't think would be on the list of closures. That might just help us to get to the, few that we need to look at. So
let's work through the last couple of questions, and then let's move forward.
Mary.
So kind of looking at what our goal is, obviously we already recommended to close a school. Now backing into that, what makes most sense for NUSD to keep the most amount of students enrolled, and because that's obviously funding, while looking at equity and ensuring that we are diversifying our school and being equitable amongst all the ones that we currently have. Is that a fair kind of 2 goals that we would want to say?
I think that those are good goals.
So looking at that, I think we need to look at 2 schools which have been losing year over year enrollment, which would be Linwood and Lucetton. And if you look at, we have an ability by redrawing boundaries, if you look at closing Lucetton, because you can diversify those into the other predominantly white schools. So if you look at, what was it, 7, slide 7, you can see San Ramon and PV only are 18 and 20% Hispanic. And by allowing to redraw those boundaries, you can help diversify those schools and make it more in line with it not being so skewed one way, and also allow additional funding to go into those schools as well. And so that's how I was looking at it. You can solve it with those two things. And then as far as moving the school, like the downtown communities, the socioeconomic disadvantage, you still have 2 schools downtown, whether it's Rancho or Lucetton or Linwood and Rancho, whatever it may be, that they still can be walking distance to a school. And especially around the Lucetton area, those people who actually are closer to Rancho, the multi-complex housing is closer to Rancho than it is Lucetton. So just thinking of that as you're having people commute to and from, whether they're walking or not, to school. So those are just kind of my thoughts on it.
Thank you, Mary.
Alejandra, you had a question?
Yes. So I have some comments about it because listening to the public comments and the parents from Lucetton, and after that, what I heard from Tina, so it really concerned me that Lucetton will be one of the ones that we are going to recommend, or that we are going to be seeing on based on the data that the parents present, that they serve 60% of the socioeconomic disadvantaged kids. If we decide to close it and move it, the transportation, it will be really hard, as Tina said, for those parents to commute to some other of the areas. And then, so what is really we will lose, or we will move the Title I to another school if we are thinking to merge it with that one. But why don't do it the other way around? The way that the school that doesn't receive a Title I to come back to Lucetton, and we continue to serve those residents. The same thing that if we move the other way around, another school that right now don't receive a Title I, but they do a very good fundraising from the parents, that culture might come to some of these other schools, and we will be able to enhance that community. It's tough for me to see what is the pattern, and that the school that we are putting into consideration to close, it's a school that serves so many Hispanic families or non-English families, when we need more inclusion in our society. That's a disadvantage. Just there, it's a disadvantage. It's a disadvantage that they were not able to comment because we didn't have a translator ready.
No, that's not an accurate statement. We had somebody here to translate for them, and we shared that with them, and we let them know that we were ready to translate for them if they were interested in sharing a comment. So I just want to clear that part up.
But it was just Meg, the one that was pulled into that one at the last moment when we were asking since the very beginning to have a translator. So we did have a translator at the beginning, and there wasn't a need, so we let her not come back. But now obviously there's a need, so we will have her come back. But in the meantime, we did have another solution that would have worked just fine. So just want to clear that part up. Okay. But that are some of the situations that I am seeing, that it would be good to have more inclusion, and if we can merge our schools in order to do it, I think that's something that we need to see. And instead of focusing on just one, to probably get the last three, the ones that rank the less. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alejandra. Tina, you had a comment?
Yes, and I want to say again, I very much appreciate participating on this committee, even as someone that's not a voting member, because I think there are really important issues to discuss. And like Alejandra, I don't think that you can close a school with a 70.9% population of Hispanic families and ignore the fact that Rancho only has 36.3. And when you look at the physical proximity of Rancho to Linwood, what you're doing then, and I don't mean that we are doing this intentionally, but it looks like discrimination because our schools that are on the edges of the district have fewer than 20% of kids that are Hispanic. So if what we're looking at is equity, if we're, and I really appreciate, and I apologize, I can't remember if it was Mary that said this, but if equity is just as important as student retention, and if we're assuming that parents are going to transition to the schools that we leave open, then I think it makes more sense to look at closing Rancho. And I say Rancho compared to Linwood because the families that attend Linwood specifically walk their kids to school. When you have a combination of a language barrier and socioeconomic issues, you don't have families with even sometimes one car in a family, right? So while we may not be able to get the data on all of that, if we're going to take a humanistic approach, if we're going to look at this with compassion, we have to really ask ourselves which families are going to endure the greatest hardship. The reason that I wouldn't put Lou Sutton into that mix is it has 62.5% Hispanic students. And I believe the families that called in indicated it was already Title I. So it's doing a really good job. And the thing we're going to run up against, no matter what we do, is the two schools in the district, San Ramon and PV, that have fewer than 20%, right? So if Rancho closed in the way that it is right now, if that was the campus to close, but if those students were to go to other schools, they have Olive, they have Lou Sutton, and they have Linwood that actually touch in terms of the district boundaries and the district map. But they also could, if it was Rancho, it wouldn't be that far to go to San Ramon or PV if you have parents with transportation. So I don't know how to do it with the numbers, because there's a lot of numbers tonight, but I do think we have to look at the issues from a human perspective and be sensitive to what a community without as much voice is going to feel depending on the decisions that we make.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, sure, Kala, sorry. And then I think, Sylvia, you have your hand raised. You would be the last one before we go. Ron also, sorry.
Okay, and then guys, at that point, we've got to try to make some movement.
So I'm interested in looking at group of schools instead of one school, only because there's, there's that socioeconomic and ethnic and all that. And then it's easy then to see which one probably makes sense, right? So, I put forth here Lou Sutton, Linwood, and Rancho in one group because they're all very close to each other. And you could basically look at the makeup, one closest, then we know how the students will get distributed across. While, yes, it'll be great to have one school identified here. Having that group makes it easier for everybody to come to a consensus and say, okay, now which one, is the one that we should be looking to close. The second group I would like to look at is, I don't know if this is something that can be done, Chris, is to rezone, right? Boundary for Pleasant Valley, San Ramon, and Olive. They are part of the same, I would say, very close boundary. And is that rezoning going to help with any of the challenges everybody has expressed around the ethnic makeup? And lastly, definitely, again, I'm sorry, Steve, but Hamilton seems to be, something that can be looked at very well with Loma Verde, how the two can possibly be consolidated.
So it wouldn't be my recommendation that the committee puts forward all of that going to tomorrow or going to our next meeting, but of course that's up to the committee. I think that, it seems like we're struggling to get to 2 schools. If we ended up at 3 schools, I think Rob could probably do that work between now and then. I want to say something about public comments in general. I hope that we acknowledge in this room or on this screen that all 8 of our schools have parent communities that would speak as eloquently and passionately about the topic as we heard from the Lou Sutton community tonight. So I hope that, and they'll have different points. Some points will be similar, some points will be different. But I hope as we're considering this, we consider that each of the schools has a passionate group of families who believe in their school and know that their school is a great place for kids, whether that's, the 3 schools that seem to be kind of rising to the top with Linwood, Lou Sutton, and Rancho, or Hamilton, or Pleasant Valley, or San Ramon, or Loma Verde, or I'm forgetting one, but you guys are getting my point. So, I just hope that we'll acknowledge that, because, I know that different schools have different perspectives about sharing their thoughts. I've heard a lot from the Rancho community in the past. I know they're terribly committed to this work to make sure they stay off this list. I know the Linwood community is passionately, believing that they shouldn't be on this list. Please know that because they aren't here and they didn't say something doesn't mean that they don't care. It doesn't mean that they don't believe in their schools or they're resigned to this fate. So I just wanted to call that out. I think that's a fair thing to do for our schools that didn't find their voice tonight for any number of various reasons. So thank you.
So one point that I wanted to share is that there's a lot of data that is shared today. Mm-hmm. I don't think any of us are actually not brave enough to put forth 2 schools. It is just that it hasn't been time to consume that data and come up with easy to out of 8 you can put forth 2, and probably there are 2 that from a data perspective, just looking at one point of view of the data, it's easy to put forth 2 school names. But it is also the responsibility of this committee to come back with the right one. And after that, the change process where we go through and analyze the data, it'll be easier. I understand what you're saying about analysis that Rob has to do, but doing that in terms of groups, I think is probably easier to shift from one to another, rather than sticking to 2 and leaving out a whole set of schools and then coming back and asking those questions. Number 2 is that the community will understand that we have looked at, a vast majority of the elementary schools and not jump to conclusion from, saying in one meeting that we are going to close one elementary school, and the next meeting we look at data for 1.5 hours and say these are the 2 schools.
So a couple of things is I hope the committee didn't just look at that data for an hour and a half today. I hope that committee has had that data since the end of last week and used that time to look at that data. So I hope that tonight was an overview of that data, more really for the community than for the committee, and to answer questions of the committee. The other thing is, as I've shared repeatedly, this is a committee, and the committee makes the decisions, and we make recommendations to try to keep this moving fluidly, to respect the role of the committee. And at the end of the day, somebody's going to make a motion probably, and somebody's going to second it, and somebody's going to vote on it, and we will move forward with that, whatever it happens to be. This is what our consultants do. So not just here, but in other places. And while here is different, school districts are school districts and schools are schools, and people love their schools, especially their neighborhood schools. But at the end of the day, this is the committee's decision to make. So, I think we're pretty close to that point. We had a couple last comments, and then we'll see where the committee is.
I just wanted, if I could just jump in really quick, and I promise I'll be quick. I just wanted to point out, because there's been a lot of discussion on equity and making sure we're taking care of those people the most, right? The social economic, the Latinx community. But I wanted to just point out, those are the people who are leaving. So at the most, out of the schools that are out in net migration. So they're looking for something else. And what is that? And so I just want to be sure when we're looking at what schools that we want to close, we really look, if you look at page 10, 12, and 13, you can see they actually at Lucetton, the Latinx community is leaving more than the white community is. And so there's a reason behind it, and I don't know. But I just think if we want to retain people, we want to look at the schools that are gaining students versus losing students. And I think that's something that we need to really think about as we are shortening this list.
Thank you.
That's what I wanted to say.
We need to continue on. I think there's two other people, Sylvia and then Ron, and then I'm going to give it back to the chair after that, please, because I know that everybody's time is important. So go ahead, Sylvia.
Okay, I don't mind to just pick 2 or 3 towards the end, because that's what it's on the agenda anyways. So, I think Lucetton, Linwood, and the Rancho will be a good one for me, myself. That's one thing. The second one is I really wouldn't mind if the district, you can go back and check on go back to Hamilton, my point about the middle school, whether the middle school part can be considered in there if they're taking more elementary students into their school. And actually, one other part is that we're going to withdraw the lines for Olive and San Ramon and Pleasant Valley. I'm thinking one of the biggest thing is the Fireman's Fund, finally sold. We're hoping something will happen. And if they do go with mixed use, my thinking is there will be a lot of housing over there. So then you're going to have a little bit different population there for Olive and San Ramon and the Pleasant Valley as well. So that's something you want to think about.
Yeah, so Laura and I have a meeting with the developer the week after we get back from spring break to talk about their plans and make sure we understand it. Rob is counting is building that into the future projections, but I'll get some more specific information that might help him with that. All right, it looks like Ron.
Ron, you're muted.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate all the comments tonight, and I wanted to just focus on 2 things, and then maybe not a formal motion, but just to kind of get things kind of moving. So
sure, exactly.
What really helps me understand when you were talking about, you made some comments that I thought were extremely helpful, talking about what schools could have the ability to absorb if other schools are closed. And kind of mapping it and doing the numbers, I thought that really is helpful criteria. So it doesn't mean there won't be disruption, but it really helped. Where could there be less disruption? And I thought about what you were talking about, where could be absorbed and who could go where as some potential. And then I looked at the criteria and the California Department of Education about best practice for school closure. And I tried to kind of mix together your comments, Tina, with what we've heard and some key criteria. So when they talked about some of the best practices to kind of reduce disruption, not going to eliminate it, but reduce disruption. And these are also points people brought up tonight. Consider ethnic balance, transportation, neighborhoods, and education programs. That was really helpful. And so what I would like to do, I'll leave, and then for the group to kick around, to at least start with 3 names, and then whether that's a consensus for all 3, then to work back and keep 3, change them all, but to at least have Rancho, Linwood, and Luz Sutton as 3 names for us to consider, and whether we stick with those 3 or get it down to 1 or 2 tonight. But I just want to put those 3 down to keep us focused so we could make best use of our time this evening. Thank you.
All right. So let's just start with that then, Ron. So if Jen would take notes, or somebody's taking notes, or Rob.
I've got it.
Ron's going to say that those 3. So we'll just start tallying up and see where we are. So Ron's was what?
Sounds like, Ollie, you're saying we're not at a vote right now. We're just kind of taking a poll to see if people can support the idea of 3 schools, Linwood, Rancho, and Luz Sutton, and then you'd narrow it down from there.
Exactly. So we just understand what the theme is here.
Okay, good.
All right, I'm keeping track. So
So Ron, come again.
Ron, I had as Luz Sutton, Linwood, and Rancho. Correct?
Correct. Those are the 3 for us to consider, whether there's consensus to keep those 3, to keep them.
Thank you.
So do you want a show of hands on that? That's not a formal vote because there hasn't been a motion, but just kind of a consensus gathering thing?
Or
I've heard it called it's a sense vote.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good sense.
Keep your hands up. If those are the 3. If those are the 3 that you would recommend, then I'm going to put that up. So just keep it for 1 second.
So say those again.
It's going to be Linwood, Luz Sutton, and Rancho. If you would like to focus on those, please keep your hand up.
Yeah, the 3 were Luz Sutton, Rancho, and Linwood. Keep those 3 in front of us.
Yeah, I can see everybody's hand. Please just keep your hands up for 1 second. Thank you. I've got Ron, I've got Shrikala, Sylvia, I have you, Betsy, hold please. Alejandra, I have you. Meg, I have you.
Would this be better if everyone goes around and just says they're 3 or 4 or 2?
Nope, I'm almost done. Ali, sorry, I'm almost done. Ali,
okay.
Is your hand up for those 3?
It is.
Thank you. Mary. Where are you, Mary? You do not have your hand up. Okay. Jennifer, hand up. And I'm not taking any. Okay. So everybody besides Mary, can you tell me if you have any recommendation or any sites that you...
I don't think we need to focus on 3. I think we can narrow it down to 2. And so that was why I didn't raise my hand on it. So I'm set on 2.
Okay, what are your 2?
Linwood and Luz Sutton.
Okay. All right. Well, that based on all of our members, there's 10 members present this evening.
I do want to state that we are doing a disservice, and we'll be back here if we don't look at Hamilton, because the data is very clear that it costs, after Linwood, it costs the most. And we have
I would recommend that the committee ask us to explore the relationship between Hamilton and San Jose. Really, the cost, the extra cost at Hamilton School is at the 6, 7, 8 program. It's not at the K-5 program. So I think we can explore that differently, but that would be the wrong rationale to put them on the elementary closure list.
I agree. I agree with you, Chris, on that. That we definitely need to look at, which is why I was asking about the split in the cost between elementary and middle school.
We'll bring that data to you next week. We have it. We'll share it next week or next week.
Only 100 and odd students enrolled. It seems like if we only looked at these 3 schools and not looked at anything in Hamilton, it is not right. Again, we are not fiscally responsible, in that space.
Well, let's break it down just like how Mary did. She just gave me 2, and it was very simple. Ron gave me 3, and it was very simple. Can we just go with Meg and just give me your 2 or 3?
Yeah, I'm saying that we have to look at consolidating the middle school, Hamilton's middle school into San Jose.
So can we just finish this one and start a new topic?
Real quick with the committee, I just threw a really quick and dirty together for this. So hold on 1 second, just so you can see. This is what we, can everybody see the spreadsheet? So this is what we just discussed. So here's your members. This is a count of the total. So you have actively right now 10 members. You have 1 for Hamilton, 10 for Lucetton, 10 for Linwood, and 9 for Rancho. So that's what it looks like just based on a poll. This is not a formal vote.
That looks good. Thank you.
Of course. Do you want me to continue to share my screen or?
No, I'm okay.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's great. And I think Ali had a question or wanted me to weigh in a little bit about Hamilton. I think
Meg, why don't you go next?
Yeah. So what I heard from the committee and then from Chris too is that probably is a consideration that's going to happen after, perhaps after these decisions are made in regard to overflow or to, what's happening at Hamilton. I feel like those decisions are really going to have to happen with programmatically and might not be in our purview in terms of a closure. It might be more of a combination that might happen after we decide or make these decisions to recommend to the board.
Yeah, I would say that it's definitely within this group's purview. I don't think it's associated with this agenda item.
Okay.
So we can agendize for the next meeting to talk about how we could restructure, something. I can work on what that looks like. I can work on it as well. But for now, we're focusing on which elementary schools should be on the list, and I think we're on a hard but good path.
Yeah, I think I agree with that, Ali. What's your feeling?
So do you have your 3 or 4, Meg?
I think she did, didn't she?
I did. I voted on the same 3 as everyone else.
Yeah.
And I agree with those.
So does that sound like we already decided on the 3 schools because the other ones are 2 out of 3. So the 3 schools to bring back next time. In addition, we're going to probably consider make a proposal to the board to look at the middle school, Hamilton Middle School.
March 16th. Please join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Actions in closed session. Diane, would you please provide us the information?
Okay. Sorry. Okay. Regarding item 3B, with respect to every item of business to be discussed in closed session, public employees discipline, dismissal, release, the board gave direction. Item 3C, with respect to every item of business to be discussed in closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54957 and Section 54957.6. Conference with labor negotiators, Jonathan Ferrer, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, Employees Organization, Nevada Federation of Teachers, NFT, informational only. And item 3D, with respect to every item of business to be discussed in closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9, conference with legal counsel, pending litigation, Coalition to Save San Marin versus Nevada Unified School District, Marin County Superior Court case number CIV 1702295, informational only. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next item is the approval of the order of business for this evening. So if there's any changes anybody wants to make, if not, I will take a motion to approve the order of business for the evening. Approval of agenda.
Motion.
Moved by Trustee Butler, seconded by Trustee Jacobson. All in favor? 7-0. And I do not see our student trustees online. David, are they there with us? Excuse me, so Eva and Jada.
And Elizabeth. Hey, there's Elizabeth.
Elizabeth, hey Elizabeth, how are you?
Hi, guys.
So approval of the order of business, item number 7, approval of the order of business. Approval, all three? Okay, thank you very much. So, okay, so the next order of business is the consent agenda. Item 9, is there any items trustees want to pull from the consent agenda?
Do we have any public comment on consent?
I see, pardon me, item number 8, public comment on the consent agenda. Any item?
Nope.
Nope. Okay, moving on to approval of the consent agenda. Thank you, sir.
I'll move approval of tonight's consent agenda.
Okay, and a second by Trustee Aguilar. All in favor of the consent agenda? 7 trustees in the room, and student trustees 1, 2, 3.
And 3.
There you go. Okay, thank you. 3 student trustees approved. Thank you. Student presentation, Trustee Superintendent.
Consent agenda.
Ooh, I'm not doing well tonight.
That's okay. You're moving us right along, though, Mr. President Milrick.
We did. We just approved it.
I'm sorry. We just approved it. My mistake. My mistake.
Well, hey, we all get okay. So student presentations, item number 10. Superintendent Koska.
Whew, I just didn't want to have to jump right on that, I guess.
Hey, we're moving.
Yeah, we're moving. Thank you. So super thrilled to have Principal Melissa Diaz here from Linwood Elementary School, and she's going to share some information and I believe a video with us that captures the cultures of caring, competence, and excellence at Linwood that shines brightly even through all the challenges that all of our schools have faced over the last year. So Principal Diaz, thank you for being here. Take it away.
Thank you. Good evening, board trustees and Superintendent Koska and the Nevada community. I'm beyond proud to share a little slice of Linwood with you tonight. The video that I'm presenting highlights just some of the great work and tremendous growth that we've seen at Linwood. Just for some context, this video includes students from 3 of our 3rd grade classes who are our pioneers that started learning in academic Spanish as 1st graders 2 years ago. We hope that you enjoy our little slice of Linwood in Espanol.
Linwood has seen many changes and transitions over the past 3 years. We are celebrating our 3rd year of dual language instruction by exploring what it is like to be a 3rd grader at Linwood in the 2021 school year. Focusing on a culture of caring, competence, and excellence, let's explore vocabulary development, persuasive writing with the topic of which virtual field trip the class should take, and a celebration of Black History Month through a study of the artist Kindi Wiley and student self-portraits. Watch as our students use Flipgrid as a platform to show their competency and learning.
Hola, soy Jenny y voy a decir mis vocabularios.
Examinar. Cuando alguien admiras a alguien o estimulas para hacer algo. Mis padres me admiran de mis buenas calificaciones. Calidad. Los objetos de calidad están hechos con los mejores productos. Me siento seguro con un casco de buena calidad. Examinar. Examinar a alguien o algo. El veterinario quiso examinar mis 3 perros. Inventó una creación nuevo. Tom busca un objeto para su invento. Simple, algo fácil. Pasear a mis 3 perros alrededor de la casa es simple. Solución es resolver un problema. Yo encontré una solución para matemáticas. Sustituto. Tomar el lugar de alguien o una cosa. Mi maestra está enferma y necesitamos un sustituto. Diseñar. Crear algo nuevo. Yo diseño una casa de perros. Gracias por escuchando mis oraciones y Now stay tuned for what Miss Thompson will choose. Will she choose? Dun, dun, dun. Who has the most votes? Does the most votes have Zoo? Or does it have what slime does in space? Let's find out. Stay tuned for our Zoom tomorrow. Bye. We're getting a party now. Bye. Bye. I'm gonna go party and find out the answer tomorrow. Bye.
Yo hizo este trasfondo porque me gusta la naturaleza y este es que inspiró a pintarla. También estaba pintando este portada porque estaba hablando de que Henry Wiley, una artista que hizo portadas y se combinó sus trasfondos con la persona y que estaba era su ropa. Que representaba yo de el color azul para el océano porque me gusta el océano mucho, verde para como para cuando estoy calmada y todo, y anaranjado es para cuando me siento feliz, y rojo me siento como me gusta comer, como una manzana. Yo pintar porque yo me gusta reptiles, porque los reptiles son increíbles y los reptiles son mi favorito animales. Yo me gusta esta pintura porque pon mucho trabajo duro en esta pintura, y a quien no le gusta los mismos niveles. ¡Yo! Yo me pinté a mí mismo. Nos estamos pintando para presentar al Henry Wiley y pinté el fondo porque me gusta la naturaleza y el sol.
thank you. Anybody have any?
We'll make Steve vote twice. Because I know he's so happy to have to vote on this topic.
These people are very dear to me.
I know they are. And I know everybody on this screen feels that way about somebody, some place, some school, some teacher, or some, something. It's hard.
Anyway, sorry. Steve.
Am I allowed to ask what? Am I allowed to ask what Steve's affiliation to Hamilton is?
He's the chief cook and bottle washer.
And the principal. So.
Okay.
So my understanding is that this meeting is being broadcast multiple ways. One is through the Zoom link, and the other is through YouTube. As I've shared a couple of times, I'm really committed to us trying to get this right. But at some point, I've also got to honor the group, and at some point, we're gonna need to move forward. This meeting is also being recorded, so we can share this recording with anybody after the fact. So I think maybe if we just say 8:15, we will have waited almost 15 minutes for this technical glitch to get taken care of.
Sure.
If you have friends who got kicked off of the YouTube link, and you can send them the Zoom link. If you're out there in Zoom world and you have friends who got kicked off the YouTube link, and you can send them the Zoom link, that would be much appreciated. Hopefully it'll be up in the next couple minutes. And then we'll keep moving. So, yeah. And by the way, everything we say in all of these meetings is recorded. That's that blinking red light up there in the top corner. So, okay, good. So I will go ahead and count down. We're going to go back to live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, welcome back, everybody. So let's just catch up from where we were. I think if we can vote on, if we can narrow it down to 2 schools, and who would be in favor of that? Narrowing it down to 2.
Looks like Mary is the only one raising her hand.
Just 1. Okay. So that means, so then can somebody make a motion that we narrow it down to 3 and NUSD look into that?
I move to narrow it down to Lou Sutton, Rancho, and Linwood.
I'd like to amend that motion.
I don't know that, Ron, sorry, I don't know that the motion was finished. Can we let Jennifer finish her motion, please?
I move to get the data to look at Linwood, Rancho, and Lou Sutton as the 3 choices of schools.
Okay.
And I'd go ahead and add an amendment. I'm not quite sure what else we want to add to that.
I'd actually like to see if we can get down to 1, and I would offer that we put it down to Linwood.
Okay, so there's actually a motion on the table. So right now the motion is for from Jennifer for narrowing it down to 3 schools: Linwood, Rancho, and Lou Sutton. And we would be asking for a second on this motion. Can we get a second?
I second it.
Okay.
So those in favor.
So this is.
Then I go one by one.
Yeah, we'd like to do a roll call on this. It's a pretty important decision, and we just want to. We don't want to put you on the spot, but it's also, your role as a committee member, and we feel it's important that you have your voice, and it's just not me reading all your hands or looking at your hands on. So Ali, go ahead and do roll call.
Srikala.
Yes.
Yes in favor of the motion.
Yes, in favor of the motion.
Okay. Alejandra.
In favor of the motion.
Sylvia.
Aye. Which
Betsy.
means in favor.
That means yes. Okay. Betsy.
In favor of the motion.
Meg.
In favor of the motion.
Steve.
Favor of the motion.
And then I'm in favor. Mary.
I'm not in favor.
Not in favor. Jennifer Lynn proposed it, so he's in favor. And then Ron.
I'll withdraw my objection for one only and go with the support the motion for 3.
Okay.
All right. So
That's
everyone has voted. It's 9-1.
9-1.
So the motion carries.
Okay, so does that mean Rob's got some homework to do for our next meeting, which is in about a month, I guess?
Can I ask for Rob some data, or Chris too, for that meeting? Can we please get the school site budgets and the testing results? I think that would help to see how effective each site is, as we look at as we narrowed it down to 3.
Yes, we can work on pulling some site specific budget information that's very high level and some student assessment data.
In addition to this year's, can we go back a year or 2 years too? Because this year's going to be a little skewed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll work with our team to get something for you that makes sense. That's logical.
Rob, will you break
Steve,
that down?
did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, will you break that data down by subgroup so we're comparing apples to apples?
You can just make sure that
We'll work with the team to get you some representative data. Yeah. I don't know what it's going to look like. I need to work with the team to get something.
Yeah, and I want to remind the committee and the community that we do have our email that you can email questions into or public comment. This is a span between meetings. Our next meeting will be on, I should have this, excuse me, and on the top of my head, I think it's the 21st. Let me confirm, I apologize. It is the 21st.
Yes, it's the 21st.
Of April. So there's like Chris said, there's a large time in between now and then. If you have questions or comments, please use the website. We will be creating FAQ if there's any questions that we can get to the committee and the community in the 3 weeks. And I think, Chris, your team will be reaching out to those school sites that were listed this evening to let them know that the process that we're going through, it's a very difficult process, and we appreciate the committee's continued efforts in this. It's not easy, and but
just one other data point: we have never looked at special ed distribution. Those in these 3 would be also good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good, thank you. All right.
Well, Chris, what's our role now if we get the community asking us opinions and thoughts? And
your best. One of the things that you have to lean on is that you're one of 11 members that's responsible for making a recommendation to the board. This is something that I get to say a lot is, really thank you for, like, if I get an email, a common response you'll get from me is thank you for sharing this important perspective. And it is an important perspective. When you're talking to people in the community, you need to let them know that you've got a really hard job to do and you're going to work on it with the district and you're going to work on it with the committee, and you committed to making the best decision for the fiscal health of the district. and you know that you can make a super strong case for keeping every single school open. Every school is wonderful. Every school, you know, you can make a great case for every school, but at the end of the day, we have to make this decision. You know, it's hard.
And the Brown Act prevents us from discussing it, right? So it's important online or on social media to not go beyond those statements, just to encourage people, send your questions to the district, here's the email, and then reassure them that everybody is doing the best they possibly can.
Yes, particularly on social media. You know, as members of this committee, one of the things you heard loud and clear from Janet at the beginning is it's really risky when you start engaging on social media, especially in large group pages where you don't know who else is interacting. So yeah, thank you, Tina, for that.
And then Chris, just last question. If I think of any other data that I would like to be requested, I can email that ahead of time so it's added, if possible, added into the deck if I think of it after the fact.
Add it soon and we'll do our best, yes.
Yeah, the sooner the better, but I appreciate anything that might help
the
decision more straightforward. I would love to have a chance to provide data that makes your job easier.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and please email the email on the website, the 7-Eleven email, so that it goes to the right people. Don't, I know that our contact information is public. Please use the district's email for this process. That'd be appreciated. All right.
All right. Well, I think.
Okay, I think that closes our
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn. At 10:22.
8:22.
I don't think we need to make a motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Ali just gets to bang the gavel.
Bang.
That's it.
And before he does, and as you're checking out, again, I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you and everything that you did. And I know these are gut-wrenching decisions. And Jennifer, I appreciate that you had the courage to make the motion that you did. I know that's personally hard for you, but I appreciate the courage that you showed in doing that. You know, that went noticed. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Ali, bang the gavel.
All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you in about a month.
Okay, take care.
Take care. Bye.